Shocking claims coming out of Mexico.
Scientists in Mexico pulling back the curtain on what they believe are aliens and put two of those corpses on display.
We don't know what's out there, so I don't discredit anything, but going back to those remains, that same person has been debunked before.
Well, it looks a lot like ET, doesn't it? And we're being asked by a so-called expert in Mexico to believe that this is an ancient alien corpse. Now, the expert, one Jaime Maussan, is known for pulling some strange stunts, but of course this time it was in front of Mexico's Congress. So is it real? We'll be asking the head of NASA's UFO independent study team, Professor David Spergel. We'll also be hearing from the Harvard scientist who believes he may have found traces of alien technology. Professor Avi Loeb is often described as the world's top alien hunter, and he'll be joining us shortly. But first, let's have a quick look at these so-called alien corpses.
If we ask ourselves, are we alone in the universe, it would be inexcusably egocentric to suggest that we are alone in the cosmos. The chemistry is too rich to declare that. The universe too vast. There are more stars in the universe than grains of sand in all the beaches of the world.
Mexico's Congress heard testimony on UFOs and the prospect of alien life, and that hearing started with what was a huge surprise.
This right here sort of stole the show.
Scientists putting on display what they claim are the remains of two extraterrestrials.
Controversial UFO researcher Jaime Maussan presented them and said it's a clear demonstration we're dealing with non-human specimens.
Not of this Earth.
The alleged alien corpses were found in Peru and are said to be 700 to 1,800 years old. X-rays of the aliens were also shown, and experts say one of the bodies had eggs inside it.
They have the big brains, the big eyes, 3 fingers, they lack teeth.
¿Qué le ha pasado a la humanidad?
It is the most important thing that has happened to humanity because it's the opportunity for us to evolve, for us to grow, for us to maybe initiate communication with other intelligences.
Sorry to burst your bubble, but no way. Sometimes we believe things a little bit too hard. I want to believe, okay? I want to believe, I want to see it, I want to be like, oh my God, it's real. I'm calling BS.
Looks like a stone carving.
It really does.
What is that?
I won't be the first. It literally just looks like ET.
ET.
ET made out of Play-Doh.
If that's an alien, I can take him. Okay?
Maussan has a history of making fantastic claims that have later been proven false.
No. In 2015, Maussan made a similar claim that turned out to be the skeleton of a human child with a deformed head.
All we really got is a hilarious video and some fantastic memes, by the way. There's some great memes that are out there about this stuff.
They just were like, you know, image of what an alien would look like from some like 1950s movie.
I have to report another failure, Your Excellency. We were unable to capture Commando Cody and hold him for ransom.
We don't know what's out there, so I don't discredit anything, but going back to those remains, that same person has been debunked before.
And then we're eventually going to find out that aliens look nothing like we think they look.
No.
It look nothing like ET.
So what does NASA make of all this? Well, we spoke to the head of the agency's independent study team, which focuses on unidentified anomalous phenomena, and we asked him if he thought the corpses were real or just a stunt for the cameras.
Most likely a stunt, but I think this is an easy one where you can say, you know, give us samples. If this is something interesting, make samples available of these mummies to the world scientific community. If it has some kind of DNA or something like that that we've never seen before, this is the greatest discovery in the history of humanity, perhaps. So make it public.
So a stunt or the greatest discovery ever? Let's ask our panel. Today we have Professor Avi Loeb, who is a professor of astrophysics at Harvard University and is sometimes described by journalists as the world's leading alien hunter. We also have Antigona Segura, an astrobiologist at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, which has actually examined samples from these corpses. And finally, we have Brian Dunning, the host of Skeptoid podcast, which is dedicated to debunking all kinds of scientific misinformation. Well, welcome to all three of you. Professor Loeb, if I may start with you, What is your view of these claims coming out of Mexico?
Well, these corpses are too similar to humans and too similar to the image of E.T. in Steven Spielberg's film. There were instances in the past where claims of that nature were made. This is not the first time. And they were studied in terms of the DNA. And what was found is that these are indeed the relics of humans combined with elements from animals. And as such, it's not easy to just examine the DNA and figure out what it is. I mean, there is a very simple way to rule out an extraterrestrial origin, and that is to find isotopes that with abundance ratio that do not represent materials on Earth. But I don't think in this case it's worth the effort, simply because it's very dubious as to where these came from and what kind of data was used to substantiate the claim. And moreover, from an astrophysicist perspective, it's very unlikely for anything biological to survive an interstellar journey because it takes millions to billions of years. A body of a biological creature cannot just withstand the bombardment of cosmic rays and the hazardous conditions of space. So up front, I would say that does not merit any significant scientific attention.
And Brian Dunning, I think you might agree with that.
No, I agree completely. Given his history of hoaxes, the people that he's working with who are representing these mummies and these fake artifacts as being actual bodies of beings, they've been doing that enough of a history that I think by now they've given up the right to being entitled to the benefit of the doubt. And I don't think there's any point to take these seriously at all. We need to move on to something more important.
Well, we will do in a second, but Antigona Segura, I can't pass up this opportunity to ask you the question, because after all, Jaime Maussan gave samples to your university. What did your fellow scientists conclude from having looked at the samples?
Okay, the samples that were given to the university were very small, like 1 gram weight and 1 centimeter, like very small pieces. And they say it was skin and a brain. That was not something that was, the university didn't have the capacity to, that laboratory didn't have the capacity to make sure that this is really skin. It's just like they did dating. That's all they did. Dating with carbon-14. And what they found is that these samples were like 1,000 years old, but every sample have a different age, which means that they have different sources, right? So even though these things are old, which says nothing more, it just says like you have an archaeological object. That's it. So the university didn't back up any of the other findings. The rest of the samples were analyzed by other labs, even in other universities. They got DNA, and the fact that they have DNA itself, it means they are Earth things, because only the life on Earth has DNA. So if we were to find any extraterrestrial life, they wouldn't have DNA.
So it seems like all the scientists are agreed, for different reasons, this cannot be alien life. So let me ask you about why the Mexican Congress would allow this man to stand before them and make a presentation.
Well, that's an excellent question, and that's something that we all scientists in Mexico are wondering about, because as it was said before, Maussan is known for his stunts. I mean, he has been doing, presenting things that later on are discovered that they are not extraterrestrials. And he has been pushing this idea that the extraterrestrials are already here in Earth, but he hasn't shown really any evidence of that. And every time he has an evidence, it is debunked. Really, that's a mystery to me and to all the scientific community here in Mexico.
And Professor Loeb, Brian Graves, a former US Navy pilot who has testified in front of US Congress about seeing UFOs or UAPs, has said that he also viewed the mummies in Mexico and that he believes they've done great harm to scientific efforts to understand UAPs. Do you agree with that?
Well, of course, when there are unsubstantiated claims, then other people have an excuse not to attend to the subject of unidentified objects altogether. So what you find is a polarization of views. On the one side, the scientists in academia saying, look at these claims, they have no merit, therefore we don't want to get engaged. And on the other hand, you have those people the believers making those statements, and they fuel each other. And both of them are not attending to evidence, including the scientists who say, we don't need evidence because we know it's wrong. And unfortunately, what appears to be common sense is not common. And the common sense says that if there are unidentified objects that the US government talks about and that are detected by multiple sensors and they cannot figure them out, then scientists could potentially help figure out what these objects are. And they may very well be human-made or natural from Earth, but we can get better data and figure it out and then move on if it's nothing exceptional. On the other hand, even if 1 in 1,000 objects ends up being extraterrestrial, that would be a major discovery. So that's the reason, that's the rationale that I established the Galileo project. And for 2 years, we built observatories that can get to the bottom of these objects.
We'll get into your work in a minute. Antigona, before we leave Mexico, is it true that Mexico is considering bringing in a law which, if approved, would make Mexico the first nation on Earth to formally recognize alien life on Earth?
I am not aware of that, and I hope if they do something like that, at least they call the experts on that, which are the astrobiologists. But I don't have.
Do you think it would be premature, basically? Yeah. Professor Loeb, you've been in the news lately yourself with some discoveries of your own. Let's first, before we get into the questioning, let's hear a little bit of the coverage from US television.
A Harvard physicist says he may have found evidence of alien technology.
The U.S. Space Command says fragments he found are almost certainly from outside our solar system.
Avi Loeb and a student started digging through old data, trying to find things that move way faster than normal meteors, and eureka! They did the math. They told the world, we think that something interstellar might have crashed in the Pacific. They went out to find this thing in the ocean. They started pulling magnets on sleds along the sea floor, and boom, they came back with 700 tiny balls like that, smaller than BBs.
The exact composition of those spheres are now being studied at 3 separate laboratories, including one at Harvard. The biggest question is this: was it a naturally occurring space rock, or was it a piece of technology?
If it ends up being technological in origin, that would change the future of human history. It's probably the most important discovery that humanity ever made.
Professor Loeb, just bring us up to date. Where are you with these spherical objects?
Right, so over the past few months, we analyzed them with the best mass spectrometer in the world in the laboratory of Stein Jacobson, my colleague at Harvard. And what we found is an excess of molten droplets from the surface of this first recognized interstellar meteor that was identified by US government satellites almost a decade ago on January 8th, 2014. And we found the excess molten droplets, spherules, along the meteor path that have a composition never reported before in the scientific literature. This is composition rich in elements like beryllium, lanthanum, uranium, with abundances that are hundreds of times up to 1,000 times the standard solar abundance. In other words, the materials making this object were very distinct relative to solar system materials. You don't find them in rocks on Earth, the Moon, Mars, or asteroids, rocks within the solar system. And therefore, we argue they're most likely from outside the solar system. They're extrasolar in composition. These spherules that we found, we call them Belau spherules because they're rich in beryllium, lanthanum, and uranium. Now, in the paper, we suggest a natural origin for such an object from a magma ocean planet that has an iron core. The Earth was a magma ocean, lava the rock was molten on the surface of Earth as a result of impacts by large objects early in its history. One of these impacts generated the moon. The moon was also a magma ocean, and Mars was a magma ocean early on. But the abundance pattern does not match any of these, and it should be a planet around a different star far away. So it's historic anyway, even if the origin is natural, just because it's the first time that humans put their hands on materials from a large object that came from outside the solar system. There is also the possibility that it was manufactured technologically, and these elements were selected. For example, if you consider lanthanum and other heavy elements between it and uranium, they are used in semiconductors. And to find out for sure whether it was natural or artificial in origin, we are planning the next expedition to look for bigger pieces of the original meteor.
Let me get a reaction from Antigona Segura. You're an astrobiologist, so you study the possibility of life beyond Earth. What do you make of Professor Loeb's discoveries?
Well, micrometeorites are falling to Earth in tons every day. So we know that in the ocean there are micrometeorites, which are these extraterrestrial materials that are very small. According to other experts in meteoritics, these micrometeorites that Dr. Loeb and his team found are not especially different to others. There are those kind of anomalies in the elements found in other pieces of micrometeorites. So for now, it's just micrometeorites. It's for the scientific community that does meteoritics and astrobiology. There is not a proof of any extraterrestrial technology.
Brian Dunning, in layman's terms, what is your reaction to Avi Loeb's discoveries?
Yeah, my job is to, I'm not a scientist, I'm a science writer. My job is to collect and read what everyone is publishing out there, including the responses, and to really get a handle on what the community feels and where the community is coming down on a particular subject. And I'm sorry, but Dr. Loeb has very little support for his conclusions, particularly the comments that some of these spherules may be technological devices or leftover bits of technological devices. As Antigona noted, you can drag a magnetic sled such as this over any part of the world, even your garden and even the roof of your building, and you will find this same micrometeorite spherules. They're falling from the sky all the time. And so it wasn't really clear to most of the reviewers who I read why the expense was gone to go all the way out to where we think this one particular item might have fallen, and why, when we pick up these items, why are we trying to match them to a particular item, and why are we concluding that these are potentially technological devices? I think those are the points that have been very hard to swallow for others in the community.
Avi Loeb?
Yeah, so first of all, this meteor had a measured speed. That was the whole reason we went there. The speed was above the escape speed from the solar system. That's what makes this meteor interstellar rather than a solar system. Only 1 in 1,000 rocks that falls on Earth of this size, which was at least 0.5 meter in size, is from interstellar space. This was the first object reported with a speed above the escape speed from the solar system. So of course, there are lots of things falling on Earth all the time and lots of things from the solar system. But the US government satellites reported a speed that was actually 60 kilometers per second relative to the local standard of rest of the Milky Way galaxy outside the solar system. That was the whole point of our paper. It was not just a random thing out of thousands of them that fall on Earth all the time. We focused on this object because the US government satellites reported it. And then some people in the community said, we don't believe the US government. So the US Space Command issued a formal letter to NASA in which it was stated that at the 99.999%, this object is interstellar, has a speed faster than necessary to escape from the gravitational pull of the sun. So when you say a lot of rocks, micrometeorites fall on Earth, of course, we know that.
Okay, can we just bring in Antigona?
But wait a second.
Forgive me, you've made your point. Antigona?
You don't allow me to say...
Well, we're running out of time, sir, so please make your point.
Well, okay, either you want me to explain or you don't. But the second point that was made, so first of all, I wanted to explain why this object is considered interstellar based on its speed. And then, in terms of composition, you just look at our scientific paper and look at the abundance pattern. And with Stein Jacobson, who worked on this subject for decades, if you compare this abundance pattern to abundance patterns of spheroids from any other object from the solar system, they don't match. It's very different. We are talking about factors of hundreds to 1,000 times the abundance of standard solar system materials. All the other rocks from the solar system have deviations from the standard solar material by factors of up to 10 or at most a few tens. So it's a question of magnitude, whether it's a few hundreds or 10.
Could we get a reaction from Antigona, please?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, that is not the way we do meteoritics. When we find something that is an anomaly, what we do is to find out what processes are causing that anomaly. It's not comparing to other solar system bodies, but understanding what processes are behind those anomalies. And the other thing is that according to models, that speed, if you have an object that enters the Earth to that speed, it will be vaporized in the atmosphere, leaving no any thing behind. And the sampling in this path and outside this path hasn't been statistically enough to say that in the path, what you have outside the path is not. It's different from what you have in the path because the sampling outside the path was just a few samples. So the evidence you are showing, Dr. Loeb, is not conclusive of anything right now, but micrometeorites that are usually found.
I'm going to have to leave it as a disagreement between you three for now. Just one last question for you, Mr. Dunning. Some space news I think you might all be able to agree on. Earlier this month, NASA announced that its James Webb Space Telescope had discovered a super-Earth exoplanet 120 light years from Earth, and it was described in some newspapers as a huge breakthrough in the search for aliens. I don't think it is, but scientists have named the planet K2-18b. Mr. Dunning, what is a super-Earth, and why are the newspapers getting excited about it possibly hosting alien life?
The super-Earth in this case is a planet with something, I believe the number currently is 6.8 times the mass of the Earth, probably ocean-covered. It's in the Goldilocks zone. We're seeing traces of potentially biosignatures chemicals that are being returned by the telescope, which we can look at the spectrum of light returning from the planet. We're going to need a lot more study because trying to resolve the contents of an atmosphere that far away is still a very tall project for a telescope like the James Webb, which can just barely get there. But it is exactly what we would hope to see, and we would exactly hope to follow up with some more complete and more detailed data and hopefully confirm that. But we may have a first legitimate biosignature.
Okay. Brian Dunning, Antigona Segura, and Avi Loeb. Stay with us. Just going to hear from the great public now on the streets of London. Salahuddin, our producer, went out to find out what they made of the alien corpses.
Do these look like aliens to you?
Looks like a very good picture.
Somebody in Mexico, an enthusiast, who showed this to Mexican politicians in Congress, and he's saying that these are alien bodies that are more than 1,000 years old. Does it look anything like that to you?
It does look like a regular mummy.
Do you think these look like alien bodies to you?
I've seen more people looking like aliens this morning.
So, because there's a Mexican UFO enthusiast, he showed it to Mexican politicians, and he says that these bodies are more than 1,000 years old.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
But so you don't...
E.T. or what?
No, it's nonsense.
nonsense.
I could make one of them in a week.
It looks like a statue to me.
No, they look like fakes.
They look like artifacts.
Do you believe him?
I am open-minded.
You can see the outline and all that. It looks like rock, but I don't know. Like I said, need more evidence, innit?
It's too square. What's that all about?
No. But if they are coming, everybody run.
Well, a great subject for Vox Pops as ever, and very popular online too. If you go to our channel on YouTube, typing in Nexus TRT World, you'll find our last show was viewed over 1.2 million times. So as ever, thank you for watching and see you next week.